Leaders chase results. But what about fulfillment? That's rare. Tony Thelen shows how to lead, win, and actually love the life you're living as a leader. Welcome to Rise to Lead, the podcast where heart-driven leaders come together to inspire and innovate. They will share actionable tips and insights that help you lead your team more successfully, advance your career or business as a leader, achieve greater impact, and experience deeper fulfillment. I'm your host, Regina Huber, guiding you through deep conversations about leadership that's rooted in service, freedom, and the desire to leave a positive mark on the world. Welcome to Rise to Lead. We are joined by yet another exceptional guest, Tony Thelen from Iowa. Welcome, Tony.
Hey, good to be with you, Regina. Thank you.
I'm so glad you can be here today. So, I'm going to introduce you real quick, and then I have so many questions for you. So let's dive right into the questions after a very short introduction, if that's okay with you.
Sounds great.
Tony is a founder. Okay, awesome. Tony is a founder and principal executive coach at the River Coaching and Consulting LLC, with a diverse 30-year career at John Deere. He's gained invaluable insights into people, change, processes, and leadership. As a certified neuro leadership coach and a member of the International Coaching Federation, he's coached over 500 individuals in various career stages. Tony, it's great to have you on. I cannot wait to learn from you. So let's jump right in.
Very good.
From your perspective, Tony, what separates a good leader from a great leader, from a truly great one? Let's just start there.
Yeah, the ones who really pull it all together, in my experience, are ones who can truly ascend away from just managing the business to truly leading the business. And the way that I define leadership, I think, is kind of unique. And it's taking people and or organizations to places where they wouldn't go on their own. To do that takes a tremendous amount of confidence with humility. It takes a tremendous amount of courage, and you have to decide as a leader where your fingerprints in the world are going to land. And ultimately, the best leaders that I've seen, they bet on impact on people's lives, whether that be individually in the company or customers or vendors, or through the communities that they impact with the product lines and the services that they have with their business. The ultimate judge of success for a true leader is whether they moved the world forward, and the world is with great products and services, or through impacting people's lives. That's ultimately the way that I've seen people find success in their career and true fulfillment in their life, which successful career is not the ultimate judge of a true leader. It's really successful career and fulfilling life.
Right. And I want to come back to this idea a little bit later in this conversation, actually, because it's a very important one. To me, success isn't really even success without that, right? And it probably depends on everybody's own definition of what success even is, because there's certainly more than one definitions. So that is a very important point, though, that you touched on already in this first part. So as we're um, looking more into the decision making and strategy arena of leadership, what are some of the most common blind spots you see in leaders, especially in these areas of decision making and strategy?
Some of the most important things that I've seen, and I guess at the macro level, one of the biggest blind spots that I've seen consistently over time on at the more senior levels of companies is an inability to acknowledge or honor like a system of leadership. So the concept is everybody's got a job to do, even leaders, CEOs, board members. everybody's got a job to do. They're expected to show up, get ABC done, just basically get stuff done that they're expected to do, and then be held accountable to that. The major blind spot that I've seen emerge is a failure to acknowledge that there's also a system of leadership, especially in complex companies. There's a system of leadership that the leader doesn't stand on the outside of and judge or orchestrate or, manipulate. They're in the system of leadership along with senior officers, along with board members, along with a long line of influencing people in the company, along with a lot of people that make the company every 24 hours, lots of decisions are made to make the firm strategy go a little further down the road. The leader's biggest blind spot is not acknowledging that system of leadership and that they themselves are inside of it. They get stuck on the left-hand side where they're just trying to get their job done, look smart, get ahead of the curve, do the job of a CEO, do the job of a senior officer, and they really don't understand how the complex orchestration of the firm creates value. And it's because of the things that happen when they're not in the room. It's the things that happen after the meetings. It's those things that happen, after the board meetings when the system of leadership takes over and makes decisions day in and day out. That's by far the biggest one. There's lots of other derailers that on a personal basis, like inadequate strategic thinking, variability in performance, emotional, not showing up with emotional intelligence all the time. Lots of those kind of on the left-hand side that you could talk to people about. But by far the biggest one at the senior levels is they either don't acknowledge it or they don't know how to operate in a complex system of leadership.
Okay, and why do you think that is? So what is the cause, in your opinion, or from
Well,
experience?
there's a couple of theories. The one that I've seen come true the most is you get rewarded on the left-hand side for doing a great job and being a good employee, and you get rewarded by getting more responsibility. You get this affirmation that you're doing a good job, and you keep getting bigger and bigger levels of responsibility. The system of rewards is like a mirror oftentimes, in that the executive gets caught up in, am I doing the job the company's asking me to do? And they get rewarded for doing more and better and higher and further. But they always look in the mirror. When they get the gold star at the end of the year or the end of the quarter, it's always the gold star comes to me. Eventually, they have to look not in the mirror, but through the window and say, how really did all of this come together to bring success together and then create the environment to allow people to do their life's finest work? And then how do they influence that? They never transition to that because they always think about the mirror and the individual contributor going up through the ranks. Now, obviously, on paper, you could be a CEO or you could be a leader responsible for tens of thousands of employees, in some cases hundreds of thousands of employees. So yes, there's always a knowledge that yes, you're responsible for a large organization. But if you never break free from thinking like an individual contributor and what the individual contributions are, you can get stuck on that left-hand side. And that's where I think you need both. You need to show up and get A's in the getting stuff done in your role and be the leader the company is asking you to be, while at the same time acknowledging that you've got to make sure and communicate across. You've got to be sensing, adapting, and responding all the time to sense what's really going on in your organization. And that's not a power, that you're not a top-down power player in that. You're a participant in that system of leadership.
Yes, that is a very interesting point, and I think we have never talked about this in this way on this podcast. So thanks for bringing this. I really liked the way you put it with the mirror, that makes it very clear to me. Now, would you say that this also could apply to entrepreneurial environments?
It's a little trickier when you deal with startups, and I've coached many startups, and it's trickier because you don't have mature processes, you don't even have mature product market fit. You don't have steady state scenarios around you. You're it's almost like you're shooting lots of small arrows in the world. Many of them are red and aren't going to result to anything, but some of them are going to be green and they're going to have a lot of value on them. And you got to pick and choose as an entrepreneur which of those arrows is going to be the one that's green that says we got to go and we got to make something of it. You got to figure that out. And it's like an entrepreneur is almost like solving mysteries. It's almost like getting technologies and people and opportunities and things align to create value, but it's inchoate, it's unsettled, it's very early. So you really do need to pick and choose certain activities and find a process to select the green arrows out of the 50 or 100 that you're shooting. Which ones are going to be the green and which ones are going to be the red, and you adapt and iterate and things like that. And then eventually, as an entrepreneur, these little green arrows turn into really, really big green arrows, and you leverage them and you put processes on them and you put lots of resources on them and you scale them and you leverage them to create more value in the world. But that early stage, I don't think you can say that there's a system of leadership that's ready to be leveraged because it's so much solving mysteries and it's not really ready for prime time on that side. So entrepreneurial startups is kind of a special space, and you've got to treat that a little bit differently, in my opinion, at least from my experience.
Right, right, I agree. And also they often have the opposite issue that they are too much in the business sometimes, micromanaging because they think they have to be in everything, right? And they have a hard time delegating sometimes. So sometimes we have the opposite problem in a way.
Yeah, I give them a lot of leeway in where they come from because they oftentimes are trying to make cash flow work for another year. They're
Mhm.
trying to get another series of money, rounded up. They're trying to be accountable to not only their personal ambitions about what you can do in the world and create value for other people, but they're trying to keep people hired. They're trying to keep people on the payroll. They're trying to take care of customers. They're trying to create something that doesn't exist. A special skill set, in my opinion, a key executive experience, no matter where you're headed in the world, is to create something new, like nothing to something, and like 0 to 1. That experience of taking something, assembling lots of things, and creating value with it is a special skill set. And it takes conviction, it takes courage, it takes perseverance. You got to believe in yourself, you got to believe in your idea, you got to believe in your small team that you have assembled, and they have to believe in you. Lots of things have to go right for an entrepreneur to get it right. So I give them a lot of leeway to make those kinds of decisions. And if you get too far out ahead of you might run out of money. You get too far out ahead of your business model or your ability to create value, people will leave. They won't believe in you. They'll lose their way through the forest. You've got to
Right.
be really, really sharp as an entrepreneur to make those decisions in a timely manner. And there's not a lot of time for process or evaluation or thinking things through for a couple of months. Oftentimes those daily decisions come swift and often, and you need a leader who can manage through that chaotic environment as an entrepreneur. That's a special, in my
Right.
opinion, that's a special space in the world.
Yes, it does require special gifts also. And yes, and then a lot of entrepreneurs. don't even get funding, and they put their own personal money into their businesses. So there's a lot that that is to that is to be considered for sure. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So whether you are now in a corporate environment or an entrepreneur, building cohesive teams or one cohesive team as an entrepreneur, maybe in the beginning, is often a challenge, right? So, what do you see as the key ingredients for creating a team that truly works well together, that has that what I call co-creational spirit?
Yeah, I think the ingredient it's an ingredient, but not like you got a recipe here. It's an
Mhm.
ingredient that when it exists, it's extremely hard to break and it break down and it really leads to the survivability of the firm, survivability of the team. And that one ingredient is trust.
Mhm.
Now, how do you build trust? Um, many ingredients to that. And I would say one of the major ones is an environment of transparency and bad news early. If something goes wrong, is there an effort to kind of, prepare a message, or is it this isn't going right? We need to, rally around this new revelation that things aren't going right. Um, is there an ability to handle bad news as a team? And then what happens around the decision making on that? Is everybody all in on that? Um, you've got to build trust in a way that when things don't go right, that's the opportunity to build the greatest amount of trust, in my opinion, because things aren't going to always go right, and it's a matter of how the senior team treats each other in that way. And as long as you've got people who can communicate, who believe that they can debate the merit of the ideas, and the key is debate robustly without the relationship being on the line. Can you get into an argument and share ideas and talk about why you think a certain thing should go the way it is or how you think things should play out and debate robustly and still have a strong relationship with people, then you've arrived as a leader when you see the team argue, but then move forward and then go advance against something that's not going right. That kind of openness that and people talk about the speed of trust and things like that. As a leader, I I always watched out like what happened when I'm not around. Were they able to speak openly with me when I'm in the room? And then when I'm not in the room, did they still make good decisions and still argue and or do they have a different conversation when I'm not around, which is a very big red flag as a leader. If there's many different conversations when you're around versus when you're not around, that's a huge red flag. So so another component to building trust is how do you actually get feedback? How do you actually know what's going on? And do you ask? And when you ask, do people feel like they can speak truth to power? And it's not even truth to power, it's truth to my friend, truth to my coworker. I may have a peer on the team and I don't want to tell them the truth because it might ruffle their feathers. It might impair my relationship with them. If that's the kind of behavior, you don't have true trust. You don't have this foundational um, trust that says we're in this together. Let's make sure and help each other out. I always call it in many different environments, but not just this trust issue. An executive's key behavior, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or anywhere, is sense, adapt, and respond. Can you sense what's going on? Can you kind of integrate it to the current world order? And then can you make a response, take an action, make a decision, follow up, ask a better question. And that's the kind of stuff that you have to sense, adapt, and respond in all situations as a strong team, but you got to do it. And you got to do it in a way that the team knows that my relationship with you is not on the line. I'm not doing that, I'm doing this to help us. I'm not doing this or questioning this or bringing this issue up to derail us. I'm here to help us, and I know you're here to help us too. You got to have that kind of a camaraderie on the team, and then as a leader, you gotta create that environment for a team to operate that way. And there's lots of things you can do to get that kind of feedback. But if you don't have the feedback and if you're not asking the questions for feedback, you really don't know unless you every once in a while, and I don't overdo it, but you've got to ask every once in a while, how are we operating as a team? How am I operating as a leader? Give me some feedback. And that will self-correct a lot of problems that may arise along the journey. Those are a few thoughts on, but it all comes down to, did you build a right team with trust? But a lot of things build up trust.
Yes, absolutely. I would also have said trust first for sure. I couldn't agree more on that. And transparency is just so key as well. I'm just observing this in a different community that I'm a part of, and that where it's just not going so well, Tony. And the reason is really because the trust has not been, or the trust has been abused of, I would say, even, and the transparency hasn't been there. And so people start doubting whether they are actually in the right place. And the same happens with any team, right? You cannot ask your team to have skin in the game if they don't even have reason to trust you. And also, one idea that I wanted to quickly add is trust is a two-way street. It doesn't just go in one direction. It also goes in the other direction. So you also need to be able to trust your team, not just they trusting you. I love what you said about sensing, adapting, and responding. I wrote that down. So sense, adapt, respond. And that's a really, really great way to put it. So thanks for that.
You bet. And you mentioned it goes to both ways,
Mhm.
and for sure, you can erode trust if if you give somebody the responsibility to do something and then you just on them all week, how's it going? How's it going? Here's what you should do. Here's what you shouldn't do. So you have to be commensurate with delegating that, and again, I go back to a mental framework of a system of leadership. If the CEO or a key leader of a group, of a strong team, thinks that they're outside of the system of leadership and they're orchestrating it, like I'm giving that system of leadership something to accomplish, and then they keep asking about it and they keep putting input on how it ought to be done, you know, there's nothing finer, there's no finer way to erode trust than
Mhm.
to delegate a responsibility to somebody, but don't really give them the roadway and the runway and the tools to do it on their own. you know that won't work. And you've
Right.
got to you've got to place yourself in the system as a leader and let the system do the work it's supposed to do. And that means people, doing the job that they're doing. And if they need help, it'll respond, and you'll have to sense and adapt, but let them do the work that they'll do, and you'll have a stronger trusting relationship at the end of the day.
Right. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. So, yeah, let's talk about that personal fulfillment that you touched on in the beginning of our conversation today. Many leaders do achieve professional success, but they feel like something is missing, right? Something is missing personally, and they may feel empty even. So, how can they bridge that gap between the professional success and the personal fulfillment if it's not there? Where would you start?
Well, first off, I would I would coach an individual to, back away from some of society's terminology and some of society's norms for what success means.
Mhm.
Um, I would I would ask them to put on a long-term view of their life and, eliminate the use of the term work-life balance and think
Oh,
more.
can I
Think
just say something? Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
I could not agree more. I just really needed to say this quickly, but go on.
Yeah, it doesn't help anybody, and it actually does harm, in my opinion, with taking a look at life in those two axes. In my way of thinking of a successful career and a fulfilling life, which is a big theme in my experience professionally and something that I'm trying to cultivate in all of my clients. You have to step back and look at life at least in four dimensions. And there might be some other critical ones, but at least the four. And if you put like a four boxes on a piece of paper, the upper left is your professional life. It's how you earn money. It's the job you're trained to do. It's the profession that you've chosen in life, or the journey of professionalism in whatever means you've selected. But it's only one fourth of the equation. In the upper right are people that you come across in the community, at schools, as your neighbor, or community events, or just lots of other, how do you relate to the world? You read somebody's books or you engage the world in some way, but the full color of the world is in the upper right with interacting with people. And then in the lower left is a more personal version of that. It's people you love. I mean, it's your spouse, it's your children, it's your parents, it's your siblings. It's people that you would place everything in the world on timeout to make sure and spend time with. And then in the lower right, which is a blind spot for some people, is themselves. Like the very personal, like introspection of the journey of their life. How did they become the way they are? Where did they come from? What are the influences in their life? What are their aspirations? At the end of life, like some exercises I do with people is write down your obituary, write down your deathbed test, like in an Aristotle way. Like, what do you want to be remembered for at the end of the day? And are you thinking broadly enough about a life well lived in just your terms? And then you step away from that picture and you find, a professional world, a public world, a very private and personal world with other people, and then a deeply personal, individual view to the experience of being a human being. And you start to really start to plan with intention. You start to say, yeah, maybe I spend 75% of my time up here, and then whatever's left over, I kind of put down, with my family, but really this trumps this. And you start to ask the tough questions. Should that trump this? Should I always prioritize work more than family? Should I prioritize my kids' activities more than staying late for the business dinners, or going on work trips all the time? Or is this the profession that allows me to achieve my family life that I want, my personal aspirations, or to be the person I want to be, which is pleasant, full of energy, enjoying social activities with people around the communities that I live in? That's the kind of questions that you back away from. And I don't think there's I mean, my coaching is CEO or one level from a CEO, occasional board members, that kind of stuff, who have been very successful in their life in certain ways. But when you just peel across a little bit of the veneer, it's these types of issues that haunt them. And that's the stuff that we've got to iron out in the right context. And work-life balance is so so demeaning and so limiting, you can't even start to have a serious conversation about the full color of life. I would never put the color of life in two colors. I would never minimize the opportunity for human experience down to two colors. And I'm just saying there's at least four major things to like start to look at the dimensions in. And there might be a few more that I develop as I get a little further down the road in thinking through this topic. But my goodness, the conversations that have been created with just those four have had revelations in people's lives, and it's changed their definition. And ultimately, I kind of bring it back around to them and say, yeah, you want you A's at home and A's at work. You want A's in all aspects of your life. So let's talk about how to do that and what those variables are. And then the work begins. Then the work begins on how to prioritize. What are the moving pieces in the four buckets? And anyway, those are the types of things that when I think of work-life balance, I really kind of get people off of that right away. And I move them quickly to let's have a serious conversation about that.
Absolutely. So I've talked about this topic quite extensively myself, and I love how you are depicting it here for us and how it can actually work, because we use so many of those terms that make no sense all the time, like time management. What is that even, right? And they're not helpful, these terms, because they get people frustrated because they don't really work as concepts, right? Like, first of all, even if you had those two parts, which I think is the first thing that's wrong about this, is work is a part of life. It's not separate from life. So why work life, right? So if anything, you just home, hobby, blah, 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 work, right? So that would make more sense. And it's a little bit more similar to how you described it. And then I often get the question, and it's aligned with this topic. What should I write into my vision? Like when I ask my clients to write a vision, they asked me, "Oh, should this only be about my professional area?" I said, "No, of course not. It's about what you want. It's about your ideal life in a way that can become your GPS, right? So it includes everything. It doesn't just include work." And then also a keyword that you said, and that is much more useful in this context, is prioritization. It's not about work-life balance. It's about, just like time management is not about managing time, it's about managing priorities and activities and tasks and whatnot and calendars, right? So resources, in a word, in a way.
Yeah, a couple of points that I
Mhm.
think would be helpful for, some of your audience. Work-life balance is in some ways a violation of human nature. And you said it, you can't be on at work and then ex- totally avoid all the other things that are going on in the life. In a 24-hour period, it's not a helpful concept. Just leave it at that. Also, you mentioned time management. It's not just time, it's energy management. And if you're
Yeah.
if you're smart, you're focused. Yeah, you got to have a schedule. And yeah, like us, we had a time we were going to meet and all that. That's fine. But did you sleep good the night before? And did you have the right meals? And did you have the right energy coming into this? And are you prepared to have the right energy throughout your life? And I still say an executive can handle all the stress in the world, and they can get more done in an hour than somebody with the proper energy than somebody without the proper energy can do all day. There's more power in an hour with the person with the proper energy and the proper focus than somebody who's flying through life just on momentum and doesn't really take care of their energy and their self and their body and their mindset and their, emotional, there's lots of different facets to that. But you got to be prepared and you got to have the right energy in order to even have a shot at having A's at home and A's at work.
Right. And it's even also about what do you put your energy into, right? So it's not just do you have the energy, but what do you use it for? That is a very important aspect of this too. So that's exactly also why I never use the word time management. Time management and work-life balance, Tony, are two terms that I only would use as hashtags because
Yeah.
they're only useful for that
Yeah,
in
and
my
that's where the sense and adapt and respond, the response is appropriately prioritizing things,
Mhm.
and sensing and adapting is a critical executive skill set that
Right.
can be honed, that you're constantly probing, you're constantly asking, you're constantly reaffirming, you're just constantly on the move to curate the kind of company that you want, the kind of relationships that you want. The sense and adapt and respond is a critical skill set that will take you far, and it leads to better prioritization and things like that.
Right. So I think you've already shared a lot of practical tips that were inherent in your answer. So thanks for that. What I want to get to also your books, right? You've written several books. So let's talk about that. Which book do you want to talk about with us?
Well, I'll talk about the one that has been out for a few years, and then I've got another book coming out. I'm very extremely excited about it coming out in early November this year. But the original one is the Am I Doing This Right? Up here on my shelf, Foundations for a Successful Career and a Fulfilling Life, which was born on an idea during COVID. I wanted to take on a project that was positive and constructive while the world went crazy with COVID, and I
I
channeled
love
my
that.
mind to giving a positive and constructive product that people can build off of. And the construct of the book is it goes through 18 key fundamental elements of what I believe to have a successful career and a fulfilling life. And each chapter has a deep, story that connects to my personal history, and I tell a brief story to frame the topic. And then my co-authors are business professors at Drake University here in Iowa, and they bring the right tools, the right approaches to the topic with some practical advice on how to go forward in your life to advance that topic. And then the third element is we surveyed over 1,000 people around the world and said, what's the most pressing advice that you would give somebody to advance their life? And we really took together, that's really where the 18 chapters came from, is all of that advice started to get clustering in. These are the 18 topics that have moved people's lives in a favorable way over time, and we give that advice to our readers. And then the fourth element is we ask some questions for the reader to think about how that might bring meaning and influence into their own life at the end of each chapter. It's been a exceptionally rewarding book. I'm very happy with how it's turned out, and I think it's changing lives for the better. Um, the one that's coming out is Things We Desire, which is based on a poem that was written in 1929 by a gentleman named Max Ehrman, and it's the poem's name is the Desiderata. Now, some of
Hmm.
your audience members may know what that is, but in my research, 80 to 90% of people don't know what that is. But it was a very famous poem that gained prominence in the 50s and 60s, and it's got a very elegant way of going through looking at life, striving to be happy, not getting too upset with when things go wrong, be aspirational about your career, but stay humble. It's a very short poem, but it's very, very impactful. Many people who read the Desiderata poem come away with two things. They believe that it was written for them, like written to them, like very personal. And secondly, they immediately feel calmer about whatever is going on in their life. They immediately feel this soft, gentle release and say, I can handle all of this. It's a very powerful poem. I pick out 30 aspects of the poem and elements of the poem. I try to add a little insight to it. Then I give 5 pieces of advice. And then there's a little bit of a place to journal and think about what could this mean in my life in the book. And I'm extremely happy to bring this poem. I want it to be the reintroduction of this poem to the world as it turns into becoming 100 years old in a couple of years. I'm happy to reintroduce that poem in a very personal way.
Wow, that sounds amazing and intriguing. And about your first book, I I can relate to the way you wrote it. So when I wrote my second book last year, Living My Freaking Amazing Life, Create the Life That's Perfect for You Anywhere in the World, right? I think you would enjoy that too, because, as you were talking about yours, I didn't have any co-authors, but it was a little bit similar in that I took stories from my life, some big adventures, some just, stories from other places in the world, and and experiences, and I put them in the context of leadership and self-leadership at the end of each chapter. So it's a little bit, going in that direction, even though yours might be completely different. So yeah, I think we would enjoy each other's books potentially.
Well, they present an opportunity to engage life in a complete way, and
Mhm,
it's not to be the best leader, and it's not to be, the best individual. It's let's look at having a good life. What's it
mhm.
mean to have a good life? And
Right.
ultimately, let's have a successful career, but let's have a fulfilling life. And let's kind of break that down a little bit. Let's break that down to what that means. And uh, there's deep meaning and a sense of belonging that you're after in life. I believe everybody wants a little bit of more meaning in life, and there's a lot of ways to do that. And these 2 books that I wrote are just a nudge towards that direction to help people in that direction.
Okay, well, thank you. Yes, and of course, we also lead ourselves. So in the end, it's also about leadership, about self-leadership, I like to call it. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and to be able to live life fully, to feel fully alive.
Yeah,
I like to
and
say
and
it
you
sometimes.
mentioned lead yourself,
Mhm,
and if there's something that I would advise your readers to do,
mhm.
I've often thought of 4 key elements to, like, how do you really get ahead and stay ahead when you think about leading a good life, you know, being a lifelong learner, really super important. And do you really behave that way? Are you always looking to adapt and take in new information? Another one is, do you initiate things, or do you wait for stuff to happen to you? So take the step, initiate some good in your life. You know, Another one is the third one would be like attempt to make rapid mastery occur. Like there's always chaos a little bit. There's always some flaw, like some gray areas and some ambiguity. We'll try to be the person that assembles all that and gives order to it and says, let's do something cool here, or let's get together on this and make a difference in our community, or in our company, or in my family, or in my life. Rapid mastery is kind of a skill set. And then the fourth one, if I could advise your audience, is just keep an emotional intelligence in check. Not everybody's going to agree with you. You're not going to have everything go great. You know, just be okay with a little conflict in the world and rattle through that and be big enough to accept the conflicts of how the world can move forward at times and put your emotional intelligence in check. So the 4 things: emotional intelligence, rapid mastery, initiating things, and become a lifelong learner. I think you'll be better off if you take a look at your life in those four ways when you think of, getting ahead and staying ahead consistently.
Yes. Yeah, I'm definitely a very curious person, so lifelong learning isn't too hard for me because I always want to know more. Um, and I believe as I look back, when I first was promoted into a leadership position, I had no background whatsoever for that, no studies. And I think it was because of what you mentioned of the desire to put order in the chaos and to really contribute some structure to something that I was seeing. And I wasn't even in a role to do that, but that was that also initiation that you mentioned as well, that, that got me that opportunity really. At the same time, I know there are different people who have different, um, what to call it, like not necessarily talents too, of course, but more like predispositions, where some people are more the type of, okay, I'm more the executing person, right? And that's fine too, we need it all. I think what's really important is, and this is also how I understood what you said, Tony, is to take charge of your life and to really be the one that guides yourself along in your life, and don't give that job to other people, right? Because they will
Yeah.
do it as they want you to be.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I wasn't planning on kind of covering or talking about this, but I used to have 6 daily affirmations that middle part of my career, the chaos and the momentum and the challenge of family, the challenge of community, challenge of, being a leader and trying to do a good job. It just got so chaotic. I just had to remind myself of 6 things every morning, like eat healthy and feel great, exercise regularly and have high energy, be positive and constructive in all I do, um, uh, constantly get better and better, like continuous improvement. And um, the fifth one was do the homework necessary to succeed. Whatever the homework is, do the homework. And then the very last one, the very last one was the most critical of them all. And that was, I am 100% responsible for my life. And I don't abdicate that to someone else. Nobody put me in a box. I'm responsible. If I don't like where I'm at, I choose. I have agency. And I can't give somebody else that agency. I'm 100% responsible. And those 6 affirmations, I I wrote them on a piece of paper, signed them, dated them, and I've got little cards, hundreds of them laying around from the day. And it reminds me that, the right mindset is you it's perishable. You can get out of the right mindset and it can be harmful to your ability to lead a good life and have a successful career and fulfillment. It's perishable. So find ways to reinforce and leadership mantra and all that stuff, daily affirmations and stuff. It's more when it's personal and it's your message to yourself. It's extremely powerful, and I believe that created the right mindset for me to grow personally and professionally, particularly in that melting pot of a furnace in the formative stages of my early, senior level career move, when I was right in the middle of my career, when I was really under pressure to do a lot of things, that was extremely helpful to have those daily affirmations.
Okay. So we've been talking longer than we had planned to. Thank you so much for coming on for this insight-rich conversation, Tony. I have had a great time having this exchange with you, and I'm sure our listeners get lots of value from this conversation. To everyone listening, share this episode with anyone who may benefit, your friends, your family, your business friends, your network. We want as many people as possible to have access to this information, also to Tony's books. and tune in next time again for another amazing guest.
Thanks, Regina, and thanks for all you do to advance the cause for so many.
Thank you. If something in your leadership feels off, or you're ready to lead with more ease and authenticity, let's talk. In a free 60-minute Lead and Thrive session, we'll cut through the noise, get honest about what's really going on, and map out your next bold move. No cookie cutter, no surface level, just real clarity and the freedom to lead as you. Spots are limited. Go to transformyourperformance.com/Lead Thrive session to grab yours. Lead like you mean it.